Hello and welcome to In a Spiritual Sense, where we discuss all things spiritual. From growing your intuition, speaking with spirit guides, diving into past lives, the paranormal, and more, join me, Stacey Piagno, where we work to bridge the gap between science and spirit. Hello and welcome to another episode of In a Spiritual Sense. I'm your host, Stacey Piagno, and I hope you guys are ready to get into some fun today because I have been wanting to do this episode for such a long time. And for those of you who listen to the show, I can pretty much guess you yourself are probably intuitives, empaths, psychic, or at least somewhat curious of the energy around you. Well, as we've been discussing, if you want to grow your intuition, you have to use it. You have to practice, and today's episode is dedicated to helping you do just that. Now, I have been accumulating tons of games, tips, and practice techniques that we're going to go through to help you grow your intuition and learn to better trust yourself. So, to give you the rundown, some of these ideas are going to help you grow your understanding of energy. So they will teach and show you how energy works and moves around us. Some will help you grow psychically. I've heard them explained as anticipation games, so the more prophetic side of life. Some will help you with manifesting and understanding that this big old matrix we're a part of is indeed a listening supporter to our lives. It's extremely mutable and we're always in charge. And then of course we're going to go over some other fun ways to grow your overall intuition by using your clear senses. And I'm probably going to give you guys way too much stuff today, so definitely use this episode as something that you can refer back to. Don't try to do everything all at the same time. That's not how this works. You have to go slowly and work on these things over time. And as you continue working with these ideas, you will get better with them and be able to start integrating them into your everyday life. So what we touch on today are just some of my favorite tips, tricks, ideas, and games. So take what you like and give it a try. Now, to start us off, I really want to go through some basics for growing your overall intuition, kind of the foundation that we will need in order to jumpstart our communication with spirit. Many might relate this to helping build your mediumship skills. However, it's not just for mediums. As you've heard me say so many times, we are spirits, and we're here on this earth experiencing what it is like to live life in the physical. And while we're here for this short amount of time, it's important to understand that we have help and guidance and inspiration around us everywhere we go. So why wouldn't we want to tap in? Well, I think half the issue is that we don't know how. Speaking with spirit is a language of its own, and just like learning a new language, we have to understand the grammar or structure, so to say. Then we have to build our vocabulary to be able to use whatever language it is we're studying. So for this first part, we're going to get into just that. Because with all the information that I give you today, if we don't understand this foundation, it's going to be hard to connect the dots or understand the why behind some of these experiments. So, the language of spirit. How can we understand it? Well, to start, I think one of the most important things for us to realize is that spirit speaks to you through your interpretation. This is the number one concept. And I'll tell you how it works for me because realistically, that's the most authentic advice I can give you. However, I've been studying under a variety of psychic mediums, and the way I understand it seems to be the way it's universally taught. Communication starts with the relationship we build with our spirit team. Now, what is our spirit team? Well, this could be our angels, our guides, our higher self, or whatever it is you connect with outside of the physical. Now, both myself and mediums that I've listened to all more or less use our spirit guides or our higher selves to help us communicate and pull in information. So to start, we have to have a relationship with the other side, our helpers. And everybody has helpers, everybody has guides, but we have to initiate the communication and show interest for them to be able to start integrating into our lives. I mean, to some degree, they will always be integrated into our lives, but we need to ask and show interest in order to help better initiate the communication. So the end-all goal for this first part is that we are going to create a communication journal. And I like to think of this as a book of rules or guidelines that we will use in tandem with our spirit team. Because if we want to allow messages to come in, we need to create a structure for this to happen. especially because your spirit team is connected to you. The way you think, the way you act is different from the person next to you. And on some level, I believe that we are a reflection of our spirit guides and them us. Or again, maybe it's your higher self that you're connecting with. So my communication journal is going to look very different than yours. And this is why you've heard me say in the past, you have to get to know the way you think and the way you learn. The biggest blockage that you can create for yourself, other than not trusting, is thinking that communicating with spirit has to look just one way. This couldn't be further from the truth. I think with movies and social media, when we think of psychics or mediums, we think the way they receive information is to always see something or hear something. But that's not always the case. And even within seeing and hearing, we're all going to see and hear differently. I might see things in my mind's eye. I might see them in my physical eye. I might get a thought of something or an idea or a daydream, or maybe it's an actual dream that I'm seeing something in. There's literally so many different ways to see and just as many different ways to hear, feel, or just know. So while you're going through this process, allow yourself to be open to receiving anything. You're going to have to go through a period where you just observe and document. Then you'll start to notice how you pick up the information. So just keep that in mind as we go through our topics today. Now, back to the journal. I am still playing around with the structure of my journal, but we're basically going to want to create a section for vocabulary and a section for grammar. But since spirit doesn't always communicate literally, I like to think of our vocabulary as the symbols section and the grammar as our guidelines for using the symbols. So the structure of how these symbols will relate to each other and how they will be presented to you will be the grammar. Now, why symbols? Well, spirit communicates through symbols. That's the way they use words. And yes, you can actually hear words in your mind as well, or just receive words in your communication. But from my experience, your spirit team will often use images to give you information. Now, how do we know what these images mean? Well, we have to place an intention on them either once we receive them or before we receive them. And I have shared some of this info in my early episodes, but for example, these are some symbols that I see and what they mean to me. When I am given the symbol of a spider web, or even just a spider, I'll usually see it in my mind's eye, but it could also be on a sign or a picture, or I could see an actual spider web in nature. When I see this, I know it has to do with taking the initiative to create one's path, taking responsibility for what is present in one's life, and changing and molding it to be what you want. How do I know this? Well, I've given that symbol that intention. So now spirit uses it to communicate with me if that message revolves around something that I or others around me need to hear. Because when a spider creates a web, it must be in tune with its environment. It uses the resources around it to carefully spin and create a mechanism to catch all it needs. Spiders are connected to wisdom. They are patient. They allow their work of creation to work for them. So when I see this symbol, it shows me how important our intention is. Our intention for creating a space or path that is connected to our environment, and it works for us. We have to work with our resources and stay fluid. It's all about creating. We are the magicians of our lives. So if I see this symbol, this is the message that in some way needs to be shared. So that was a deep example. Here is a shallow one. If I see a butterfly, again, for me, I see a lot in my mind's eye, which basically means I close my eyes and I see a silhouette pop up of something. When I see a butterfly, it stands for transition and growth. So for example, this has happened. One time I was in a situation where I would have normally reacted out of impulsiveness. However, this time I was more patient and more receptive. I closed my eyes and I saw that butterfly silhouette. Spirit is trying to praise me for being patient. They're showing me this was a situation for me to practice my patience. And because of my response, I'm growing. Or sometimes I'll see that symbol during a meditation or when I'm practicing my communication. Well, that's because I'm in a stage in my life where I am transforming. My communication with spirit is getting stronger. I've also placed an intention on trying to see either a caterpillar, a cocoon, or a butterfly. So this, for example, could show me various stages of growth. If I see a caterpillar, maybe someone or myself has not yet initiated their transformation. If I see a cocoon, maybe they're still working on their development, which we'll always be continuously working on. So maybe it's that they are about to emerge or about to have a big breakthrough. And then again, if I see the butterfly, perhaps that person or myself has transformed or transmuted that energy for whatever it is they were trying to accomplish. If I see a bee, it stands for teamwork. Whoever's involved needs to better work together. Or maybe two people are working really well together. If I see a bear, it stands for rest. If I see a table and someone comes to sit down at the table, that means I am meeting a spirit and we can start communicating. If I see an envelope or a mailbox, that means I have a message. Sometimes, actually a lot of the times, I see colors, and colors are big. For me, green, for example, is connected to the heart or healing energy. So when I see green around someone or two people, I know it has to do with healing and love. And so colors, in addition to symbols, are also going to be important to document in order to expand our vocabulary. So another thing I would recommend putting intentions on are colors. And you can also do this with numbers as well. Numbers are everywhere, and they are used to create everything. So I use colors and numbers a lot for obtaining meaning. And again, that's just one concept that works well with my brain and my learning style. I also had a medium tell me that I am meant to work with colors. So to make sure that I incorporate that into my communication with spirit. But colors are extremely useful for finding information. Like numbers, they are used to create everything, and they exist everywhere. They correlate to our chakras, our emotions. They hold vibrations and wavelengths. So colors and numbers are also something I would recommend placing intentions on and adding into your journal as well. For me, I've created basically a dictionary that is in the beginning of my journal, and the plan is that I continuously add to it as I learn or come up with new symbols. And this is what your guides or higher self will use to present to you to gain information. So next, once you start to come up with the lingo, you need to spend some time coming up with a process for spirit to use these symbols. And this is where your learning style will come into play. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Are you a visual learner? Are you more auditory? Do you need to touch objects? Is spirit going to move your body? Do you get downloads of information and you just have a knowing without explaining? Can you feel energy come into your space? Leave your space? Can you feel high or dense energy? It's going to be different for everyone, but this is going to play into how you receive and how you notice the information. And so with that, what is the procedure or strategy of how you want these symbols to be presented to you? So how do you want spirit to connect the dots from symbol to symbol? This is why I call it grammar or structure. For instance, the system I use for reading myself or others, if I'm trying to heal or give advice, which I'm still totally working on, is step 1. I want to first connect with the person's overall energy, the expanded out view of that soul. Then I will go into more specific details. So first I will ask spirit to show me something that represents the person's overall energy or purpose. And I'll stay patient and I'll see what comes up. Then maybe we'll go through each of the chakras, or I'll allow spirit to zoom into something that maybe needs tending to. So maybe they will show me a body part, or maybe the color of their aura will change, or something will be magnified. Again, maybe I'll see colors, maybe I'll see symbols, and it depends on how the symbols interact with each other that will give me the information. One time I saw an arrow pointing to my lower back. Well, I have a lot of lower back pain. So this is an example of a physical ailment I had and how I was able to see that within myself. In addition to healing, I mentioned seeing a table when I want to meet a spirit. So if I want to connect with an ancestor, I have placed an intention on sitting at a table. And whoever walks through that door will be who I'm about to communicate with. And just for the record, I always use my guides to help me filter energy. I place an intention on only communicating with those who are here to help, and they basically have to be approved by my guides before I can communicate with them. So again, maybe I'll just see a table pop up in my head. That means someone is trying to communicate. Or I will intentionally visualize myself sitting down at a table if I am trying to initiate the communication. So you have to come up with your own symbols and rules for you and spirit to use to communicate. And you have to practice spending time together and more or less train each other to what it is you are expecting. And it's funny, this year, you guys know I'm a teacher. I teach first grade, and I have this girl in my class who is deaf. And I speak no sign language, although I'm learning. It's kind of more or less a game of charades that we play every day together. And not only is she deaf, but she also has very limited language in general. So she's still learning words for, everyday objects and concepts. And it's been such a beautiful experience learning to communicate with her. And it really reminds me of what we're talking about here today. Just the other day, I had to communicate with her this concept that we were having an award ceremony. And I wanted to explain to her that 2 students in the class were going to win. Because last time we had this award ceremony, she got very upset because she did not win and she was not able to understand what was going on. And so this month, I was trying to communicate with her that 2 more students were about to win and we needed to celebrate them and be excited for them. And trying to explain this concept to somebody who, 1, cannot hear, and 2, has no language, was identical to how I feel Spirit tries to communicate with us. And so I really wanted to share this example. But what I basically came up with is that I had to give her a lot of visuals. So I actually pulled up a photograph of the last award ceremony we had, and I showed her that. And then I paired it with showing her the day on the calendar, which was going to be tomorrow, the next day. And then she has this little book of all of her classmates so that she can learn their names and she can create signs for each of their names. And so I pulled up the 2 classmates that were going to win. And then I looked at her and I kind of gave her a smile and I kind of clapped my hands. And so the order of how these images were presented to her was a photograph of the last ceremony, which was the place, the day of the calendar, which is tomorrow, that's the time. I showed her the 2 faces of the boys who were about to win, and then I made a smiley face and we kind of clapped together, showing her that we need to show support to these 2 friends who are about to win an award. And boy, if that did not remind me of the way I receive images in order to understand a message from Spirit. That's how I receive messages in my mind. And that's what I was trying to produce for her to understand. And the situation went beautifully. She did understand the message. She was clapping and cheering for them. And it was such a beautiful moment. So I really wanted to share that because it really shows a great example for those who are looking to receive information from the other side. So that's kind of the beginning that I would recommend working with if you are looking to better understand your communication with Spirit and implement it into your daily life. Because the more aware you are of this, the more you will realize we are always receiving communication. So that's the background that I really wanted to introduce you to. Now we're going to get into some fun, energetic experiments. Okay, I'm going to start with a couple of experiments to help you use your clairvoyance, which is seeing, and clairsentience and clairtangency, which is about feeling and touching. So the first experiment for you to try is going to help you practice seeing your aura color. Everybody always wants to know their aura color. I also have an episode that came out last season that goes over auras more in depth. So I'm not going to get into it too much, but for this experiment, all you need is a white piece of paper. So what you're going to do first is you're going to place an intention on wanting to see your aura color. Auras can be kind of confusing. I believe we have different layers of auras, and there are some colors that are going to change based on how we feel in the moment or based on what kind of energy we come in contact with. However, this is where our intention is going to come into play. So ask for your guides or whoever to help you connect and see your soul aura color, which I believe is connected to our purpose. Once you do that, pull out your white piece of paper. You're going to open your hand with your fingers spread out wide, and you're going to place it on that white piece of paper. And now I'm holding it up in the air for you guys to see. Again, if you want to see any of these experiments today, go hop on YouTube. I've got all the episodes recorded. But you're going to put this white piece of paper down flat on a desk. It would be better if your desk is, of course, decluttered, just to cut out some of that busy noise. But you're going to open your fingers, spread them wide, place it down on the white paper. Also, it's good if you are in bright lighting or near a window. Make sure it's not too dark. But once you spread your fingers out wide, your hand is down flat on the paper, you're going to stare in between your fingers and kind of blur your eyes, like kind of zone them out. And you want to hold your stare down in one spot again, between your fingers, and count to 20. Now, you might see white light start to form around your hand. This is part of your energy. That's good if you see that. Then once you count to 20, you're going to close your eyes, remove your hand, and open your eyes. And whatever color you sense, that means whatever color you see, feel, think of, that will be your aura color. For me, I see the color sitting right on top of the paper. Like you're probably going to see the energy in the shape of your hand. So give this experiment a try and then read up on aura colors after you do it and see if the color that you saw resonates with your personality or purpose. I would recommend not looking up too many color definitions before you do it, however, because your mind might try to see what you want it to see, which in a way is also kind of valid. But try to go into it with the least amount of research. And then once you see your color, try to find meaning after that. And if it doesn't work on the first time, take a break, try it again. Or keep trying on different days and see if you get a consistent color. What this experiment is trying to do is help you train your eye so that you can see this energy whenever you want. You can also stand in front of a white or light colored wall and try to do the same thing by staring in between your neck and shoulders or staring over your head. I also try to see other people's aura colors, which is a little more challenging. I am still practicing. I can pretty much always see that white light around people, but I'm still learning how to notice the colors more frequently. So it's something that you have to practice. Again, this stuff takes time and development. We have to retrain our senses to pick up on the subtlety of energy. Because the way our physical brain works is that if we are not using something, our brain tunes it out. It deems background noise or energy to be insignificant. Therefore, we don't always sense what is actually there, unless we retrain ourselves to sense it by tuning back into the subtleties. In addition to this, there are some cool experiments to help you feel energy with your hands and wrists. I've spoken a little about this in the past, about how we have tons of energy centers on our hands. And I've recently been learning about the sensitivity in our wrists as well. So there's lots of different ways that people can play with this. But first, I want you to bring your hands together about 3 inches apart, as if you're about to clap. Then you're going to twist your hands from side to side and make an X. So one hand will shift down, the other will shift up, and you're going to line up your wrists in the center as an X. So I've got a visual here on YouTube. But once you have that X, the goal is to use the energy centers in your wrists to try to feel energy. So you will bring your wrists farther apart and closer together. When I do it, I start to feel a little tingle from wrist to wrist, and it's super subtle, but with our awareness of these energy centers and the practice of doing this more often, you will be able to use these sensitivities to help you feel imbalances. So I've heard from healers that once they have activated and worked with these energy centers, they will be able to run their wrists over patients or over themselves, and that's how they begin to feel energy and do their energy work. So this is just a quick fun one to help you begin feeling how energy feels and noticing the subtleties that we are not normally aware of. So you can try the X with your wrists, or another way to feel energy with your hands is that you can cup them and kind of do the same thing. So instead of focusing on your wrists, you're now going to focus on your hands. You're going to bring attention to the palms of your hands, and you're going to bring them further away and closer together. And you're going to keep practicing that. You can even clap or rub your hands together as well, and that's going to start to activate the blood flow in your hands, and you may be able to feel that energy a little bit better. And so to me, the point of these experiments is to show you that even though we can't always see energy, it is there. And when we begin to acknowledge it and work with it, we can begin to move it. So perhaps if you are an energy worker, this will be a good start for you to work with your gift. If you're not meant to be an energy healer, I think having an understanding of it is just as cool and beneficial. So try those and see if you can start to feel energy. I know for me, a goal that I have is to be better able to heal my personal energy. So for me, I would like to get to a point where I can feel which chakra may be off or need cleansing. If I have an ailment, I would like to be able to better move my energy around to help me clear blockages. And this is something I believe we can all tap into. I just think it takes time and, of course, a retraining of something that many of us have not been exposed to. And I think these tricks are a good place to start initiating the abilities that we were born with, but again, not exposed to. So, in addition to using your hands to help you feel energy, this next experiment will help you see how our energy changes and moves depending on how we're feeling. So we're basically going to prove that our thoughts and our feelings create wavelengths. And for this experiment, you're going to need 2 coat hangers, and what we're basically going to do is make dowsing rods. For those who are unaware of what dowsing rods are, they are more or less 2 L-shaped rods that are used for helping find water and minerals in the ground. However, dowsing rods also have a history of being used as a divination tool as well. They can help people connect with or notice energy. And we actually did discuss dowsing rods on one of the Halloween episodes last season because it's a tool that we would use on our ghost tours to help guests connect with spirits. So you can use the rods to help you ask yes or no questions because they can easily be manipulated by external energy or internal energy. But for today, we are not going to try to contact spirits. We are going to use these rods to help us feel our own energy and see what happens when we think or encounter different situations. So what you're going to do is unravel the coat hanger. I have one here. I had to trim mine a little bit. And you just want to make an L. So you want to create a short handle that is about 1/3 or 1/4 the size of the longer end. So it will look something like this. And I only have one here with me today, but you'll get the point. So what you're going to do is you're going to hold the shorter side and you're going to hold them relaxed down low by your chest. I'm going to hold mine up a little bit so you guys can see. And at first, they're probably going to wiggle around a lot, but just take some breaths and get them to a point where they are resting still. You want to have your grip really loose though, because we want to allow our energy to move them. So first, once the rods are settled and pointing straight, I want you to keep your eyes open and fixed to something straight ahead and vividly think of something in your past that was unpleasant. Now, if you don't want to visit something that was unpleasant, obviously, then don't do this. Or maybe choose something that was more mundane, that maybe aggravated you, like being in traffic. I don't want to have anybody feeling crappy for the rest of your day because you revisited some trauma. I just want to show you this experiment. So depending on how unpleasant this situation is for you, you will notice the rods start to contract inward and the tips may touch or become close. This is because when we are involved in events that we deem to be unpleasant, our energy naturally contracts inward closer to our body. So the idea is that these rods are following the electromagnetic bands around your body, which are contracting due to that negative experience. Next, I want you to keep the rods where they are, but switch to thinking of something positive or a joyful experience. In this case, the rods will begin to expand and move outward from each other. And this is because when we're excited or loving or in a joyous state, our energy expands. It radiates outwards. So this is a cool way to see how our auras and energy expand and contract based on our feelings and thoughts. And this one takes a little bit of practice because if you're not really visualizing or feeling the situation, the rods won't really pick up on the energy. We have to get back to that state of mind to help our energy actually contract and expand. So this might be a good one to try when you're doing a meditation, not when you're busy and trying to rush it. So those are some fun ones for seeing auras and feeling energy. And before I get into the next experiment, I want to briefly touch on our brain and the way it's sectioned, because this is some more important background. So we know that we have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is more logical, practical, analytical, and mental, and the right hemisphere is more creative, fluid, and emotional. Most people are more developed in one side versus the other. However, both sides are important and we need to use both. The thing with trying to train ourselves to become more in tune with spirit, however, is that we need to make sure that we are able to consciously tap into our right hemisphere and stay there. And in order to do this, we have to have a good relationship with both sides of our brain. Why do we need a good relationship with both sides? Because we need to be able to observe and understand which hemisphere is leading in any given moment. We have to be familiar with what it feels like to be tapped in to each side. Because if we try to connect with spirit, but our left brain is leading, we are going to block ourselves and get a lot of that mental chatter. If we, however, are tapped into our right brain, we will allow ourselves to be more fluid and open so we can hear the messages that Spirit gives us. This will also answer the question of, is it just my mind giving me the information, or is it really a message from Spirit? Well, if you take time to observe your thoughts more frequently, you will start to notice a difference and feel which side is leading in that moment. And along with this, it's really important that as we are learning to communicate with Spirit, we are exercising our right hemisphere. We need to train it to stay tapped in. So everything we talk about today is an example of exercising your right brain. Anything that deals with art, music, expression, keep doing it. That's your right brain. Meditation, dance, dream work, automatic writing, that's your right brain. Even practicing simple things to break you out of your logic, like writing sideways on lined paper, drawing with your opposite hand, driving to work different ways. Anything that will break mental boundaries and break the mold of structure that we are so used to is going to work on that right hemisphere and allow us to pick up on things that our normal physical left hemisphere might not deem to be valid. Remember, the brain runs the physical body. And yes, we are physical at this time, and we need our brains to work this way to survive in this very physical life. But we are not just physical. And when we can retrain our brains to power down a little, the mind of our heart starts to open. Or I should say the mind of our third eye, our pineal gland, which is the brain of our soul. It's the brain connected to our higher self. It's what allows us to better feel and use our clear senses. And for most of us, our pineal gland gets corroded. It's not used or exercised, so it doesn't work properly. It's not quite functioning. This muscle is something that we have to train in order to awaken. And everything that we talk about today is going to help train it. So the next few things that I want you to try, I'm going to go over quickly because some of them we might have talked about. But basically, in order to build or open up your intuition, you have to have a relationship with the other side. And you have to trust that the spirit side of life is something that we can interact with. So let's interact with it. In addition to the previous energetic experiments that we just spoke about, the next thing I want you to try, if you have not tried already, is to ask your spirit guides or your higher self or just spirit to show you something. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before, but ask for something specific. And we're going to get into some more of these tricks in a minute when we talk about manifesting. But just to initiate your awareness of spirit, ask to see something that you wouldn't normally see on a day-to-day basis. Or ask for the next song to come on to be a message for you. That's one of my favorites. I love to play with songs because I bet all of you had at least had one time where you needed guidance and then a song came on the radio and it couldn't have been more fitting. So try this. Again, the goal is to start interacting with spirit and asking or noticing messages. Because the more you notice messages or communication, the more you will be expecting it. And the more you expect it, the more you will receive it, and the more you will see it. And the more you will realize it's not at all random, but in fact intentional. And it is something that is in your control. So try asking a question and specify that you want to receive your answer on the next song. Or in addition to songs, just specify that you want to receive an answer to your question by the end of the day. And ask to make sure spirit helps you notice it. Like sometimes I'll say, Spirit, help me understand when you're giving me a message. Like, help me make sure I notice it, whatever it is. Another fun one to have Spirit help you with is finding parking spots. This is a super common thing to practice, and it works. I always find parking spots at times when most people can't. I mean, it's crazy. I will pull into a full lot, and because it's my intention to find one, and I ask my Spirit team for help, 9 out of 10 times, I'll have someone pull out right at the last moment. It's actually become a joke in my family. Like, it's impossible for me to not find one. So that's something easy that you can play with. A couple of other quick ones are to ask a question before bed or before a meditation and see what comes up. Y'all know I like dream work. If you go to bed with an intention or a question, in some way it will be answered. And if it doesn't work on the first night, keep trying. It usually keeps me a couple of nights with the same intention or the same question before I will sometimes get an answer. And if you want to know more about incorporating dream work, I have lots of episodes on that. But asking a question is a great way to give purpose to a meditation or a night of dreaming. And it will help you practice spending time in those spaces and building a relationship with that space. And what I mean by that is the more time you spend meditating or recalling your dreams, the more familiarity you will gain of that space you are in. And this really goes for anything. You have to spend time with these processes or again spaces to get to know what it feels like or looks like or sounds like, etc. Like when I was talking about using colors earlier for definitions. Well, something I'm currently working on is sitting with each color in my mind and just observing it. What does red feel like? What does red sound like? What does red look like? Go through each of your senses for each color and just see what jumps out at you. Maybe you find that you are only seeing the colors. Great, you're a seer. Maybe you only get feelings with each color and you can't see shit. That's okay, you're a feeler. Go through each of the clairs and see what reaction you have most often. Then work with that sense. Go through each of your chakras and just sit with the intention of spending time with each one. Spend a week meditating on your root chakra and take notes. Then spend a week sitting with your sacral chakra, then solar, and so on and so on. You have to build relationships with energy or body parts or your senses, just as you build relationships with people. I mean, really, if you never spend time with a person, are you going to know them? No. Energetics is the same. One last quick thing that I also think is beneficial is to write affirmations on your phone alarms and have them go off at different times of the day. We're going to get into manifesting in a little, but when we keep hearing and seeing and saying the same things over and over, it becomes a part of our reality. I think the episode Energetically Speaking that I did last season talks a lot about how our brain sends out information that basically creates our environment, which is a part of manifesting. So that would be a good episode to listen to. But for example, if you want to strengthen your mediumship or psychic skills, set affirmations about that. The key, however, is wording it as if you already are what you want. You have to be cautious about how you write the affirmation. If you say something like, I wish to become more psychic, then you are always going to be striving towards that thing. It's always going to be ahead of you because you are always expecting it to come one day. You have to switch your words and your thinking to feel that you already are that thing. In quantum physics, every possibility of everything is already in existence. So if we follow that law, the version of you that you are wishing to connect with is already in existence. All you have to do is connect with that version of you by embodying it, and you start to realign your energy to that life. That's what people describe as quantum jumping, which we're not going to get into today, but it's beneficial for manifesting what you want because what you want is already in existence. Anything that could possibly be thought of is in existence. We just have to connect with it. So, back to the affirmations. In contrast to becoming that thing one day, it would be better to say, I am psychic. I can communicate with spirit. I always notice messages from the universe. However you want to word it. And by the way, we should also be thinking in the present as well. This is not just for affirmations. Trust that you already have these abilities because you do. The key is just to notice how often you are using it and practice. So that's a lot of quick intuitive things to incorporate into your life. Now we're going to get into the more prophetic side of things. Psychic games. So as I've mentioned earlier, I've heard these explained as anticipation games, which I love because they are just that. Just as we have to retrain ourselves to receive messages, we have to train ourselves to anticipate that things will happen. So for this first game, I want you to spend a week anticipating who is texting you every time your phone goes off. And when you do this, I just want you to pause for a brief moment before looking at your phone and just see if anything pops up in one of your senses. That's what we're looking for when we receive communication. At least that's what I've noticed within myself. When I'm receiving something from outside of me, it's as if it just pops up from left field. When it's my brain, I feel like it's more of a guess and I start to overthink. So you're just going to take a breath. I like to sometimes close my eyes because it cuts out some of the distractions. And the first thing that pops up for me will be my answer. So practice this with your phone. We all have one. Most of us probably use it every day, all the time. That's why this is great, because we always have them on us. And the point is to practice these skills daily. So every time your phone goes off, anticipate who it is. You can also have your friends send you messages of random things at different times or random pictures. And when you see a friend has messaged you, try to guess what they sent before you open it. Again, you're trying to use your third eye and strengthen it. Who cares if you're wrong? Just start practicing. You can also try this with time. Like try to guess what time it is. I used to do that when I would wake up in the morning, assuming I don't have an alarm on. And I used to practice this all the time. And it actually started on accident. Like before I started to study any of this, there was like a month where it would happen and I would wake up in that in-between state and I could bet my life on what time it was. Like I am not even making it up. I would wake up and I just knew that it was 7:21. And I knew it so confidently I couldn't even explain it. I didn't even have to look at the clock, but of course I did. And yep, it was 7:21. So practice anticipating things. When you hear a phone call, what time it is. When you hear a knock on the door. You could also try to anticipate where that parking spot is going to be. Again, use your spirit team as well. Ask them to show you who's on the phone or what time it is or who's at the door or where the parking spot is. And practice sensing it. Not just guessing, but sensing. There's a really neat card game. I haven't tried it, but I really need to get it. It's called Build Your Psychic Skills, the 90-Day Plan. And it has daily prompts to help you practice. So on Mondays, you try this. On Tuesdays, you try this. And if you don't want to come up with your own games or ideas, I would recommend getting this. I know it's on Amazon, and it just seems really cool. So again, it's just more ideas to help you bring your attention and intention to the energetic world. Another thing that you can try to anticipate is, one, when you wake up, try to tap into what kind of day you're going to have, or maybe something specific that will happen in that day. This is a great way to start your morning. Or along with this, as you move throughout your day, try to anticipate what kind of vibe a space or a room that you might walk into is going to have. Or just pay attention to spaces in general. Like when you walk into a room or an area, try sensing what that energy feels like. I guarantee we already do this anyways. We just don't notice that we do it. So bring more attention to that. That's what all this is about. Bringing attention to the energetics of life and working with it more often. And once you start playing with these, count how many psychic scenarios you have in a day and write them down, at least in the beginning. Then back off because it's going to be so many experiences you won't even be able to count. I remember when I first started to notice synchronicities or coincidences or psychic moments, I would have like one a month. And I'd call my friends and I'd be like, oh, it's so cool. Guess what just happened? And I would go tell everybody. Then I would start to notice like one a week, then one each day. Now I'm like, okay, how many times a day can I count these situations? And so as you do this, you'll also notice they kind of become more common and maybe they aren't as exciting because it just becomes a part of your new norm, which is good. That's what we want. However, if you stop paying attention to these situations, you will notice it starts to fade. That's what happens with me. Sometimes I get really busy and I'm not practicing or tapping in or communicating. And I'm like, man, I feel really disconnected. I haven't had a lot of communication lately. But it's not because the communication has stopped. It's because I'm not in tune with it. And that's literally the point I'm trying to make. If you use it, you notice it. If you don't, you won't. And there's really a whole heck of a lot more going on around us all the time. We just aren't tapped in. So when I stop noticing or paying attention to these types of things, it fades. But once I tune back in, it's like I never skipped a beat. It's pure awareness. And of course, practice. So The last couple of games that are fun to practice as far as building your psychic skills are to try to sense something that is covered up or hidden. And these work really well with partners. So you can have a friend put something in a bag, or you can buy cards with images on them and just have a friend hold one or cover it up or whatever. And try to tap into what is on the card or in the bag. I see a lot of these games on social media, so you can probably search for them. But for example, I've seen videos asking you to guess which of the 3 cards I will pull, or which of the 3 crystals I will choose. And you have to try to tap in and choose the right answer. Those are always fun. Or you can just practice sitting with a friend and trying to read their energy, or trying to guess what they're thinking. Maybe give 3 to 5 choices, or an animal or a number or something, and sense what they're thinking. Again, you're not trying to guess. That's up to the mind and the physical brain. You are trying to sense what the answer is. Again, practice quieting your mind and just go with the first thing that pops up. It might feel difficult in the beginning, but just keep practicing and you will start to notice your initial thoughts. So, with all of this so far, you have hopefully by this point connected with the idea that yes, this matrix and environment around us is alive and moving. It's always changing and flowing and reacting to our wants and needs. So we're going to now get into manifesting, because if you want to become a master manifester, then we have to understand that what we put into the field is what we will get. We have to practice knowing and feeling the difference between what we think we are asking for and what we're actually asking for with our energy. And these next experiments will help with just that. Now, a lot of the experiments in this next part come from a book called E² by Pam Grout. That's E2. It's got a big E2 on the front cover. And it's basically a book of really cool energetic experiments that prove to you the quantum field around us is something that we can and do interact with. So to start us off, this is one of my favorite experiments. I kind of touched on it earlier when I was talking about connecting with your guides or spirit team. But you're going to start by asking for something, but not just anything, something big, a miracle, if you will, something that you would not normally come across on the day-to-day. And you're going to give yourself 48 hours for it to show up. Then make sure to document it when it happens. You're honestly going to want to document everything you try today because it will help build your trust and solidify your experiences. So I tried this experiment not too long ago, and I kind of do this one often. Like I'll ask for something magical to happen, or again, a miracle. And this is something that helps me feel connected to spirit. I try to stay in constant contact with my spirit team because again, it's a relationship. And the more you put into a relationship, the stronger it will be. But since I started writing this episode, it's been a while since I've asked for this. And so for the sake of the experiment, I tried it again. And I actually have 2 parts to this experiment. I was really ballsy in the beginning. I was like, I'm going to try something really hard. And I'm going to buy into it with all my power and all my awareness, which is the foundation of manifesting and all of these demonstrations. You really have to believe it. But I was in the grocery store and I told myself as I was walking out, okay, by the time I get to my car, I will see another car with a star on it. And it was honestly just the first thing that I thought of. By this time I had bought in the book E², but I hadn't read it yet. And I knew that this was kind of the stuff in the book. And so I just wanted to start by practicing something. So I said, I'm going to see a car with a star. And I'm not going to lie. There was a part of me that was like, really, Stacey, you have like 30 feet until you get to your car. But I'm like, stop, don't buy into the doubt. I really want to try this. And so I really bought into it. I imagined myself seeing a car with a star and all the laughter that would happen because the amount of time I have left is running out and this is crazy and it seems impossible. Meanwhile, I'm now like 15 feet from my car and there it is. I look to the right and I see a car with 3 stars on it. So that was my quick example. Now, after I got the book and I read some more, I figured I would try this again. But this time, as the experiment states, I wanted to try something more meaningful. So this time I asked for a miracle to happen, or something really noticeable. And I asked my guides to make sure I noticed when it happened. So I gave myself 48 hours. I started one evening and I had 2 days for this miracle to occur. Well, 2 days had passed. It was the next evening when I was driving home from work. And I'm like, I've got like 2 more hours for this miracle to happen and still nothing. So yes, I felt the doubt start to creep in. However, I decided to block it out and expected my miracle to show up. Now to backtrack a little. Earlier during lunch, I was trying to get a hold of my doctor to fill a prescription. That was already hard enough because I was at work, again, I'm a teacher. I have absolutely no downtime. So it was a bit of a hassle. And finally, when I got a hold of the nurse, she's like, no problem, we'll send it to the pharmacy. So after work, I call the pharmacy and I'm getting ready to go pick it up. And they're like, we haven't gotten anything called in for you yet today. And I'm like, seriously? So I quickly call the doctor back and some girl answers. And I was like, hey, I called in a prescription earlier today during lunch. The pharmacy said they still haven't received it. Can you please check on this because I'm a little bit in a rush? And she's like, oh, such and such hasn't called it in yet, really nonchalantly. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm at the pharmacy. Can you please call it in, like ASAP? And she was kind of like rude or maybe a little naive and was like, well, I'll tell the nurse to call it in before the end of the day. And it's already like 4:30 in the evening. And I'm like, okay, well, when is that? Because I called earlier at lunch today and I'm starting to get a little snippy. And she's like, well, we close at 5, so she'll do it before then. So I'm not going to lie, I was getting a little pissed. And I was already playing phone call with them all day. Now I'm here. It's not ready. Finally, I wait until 5 o'clock. I haven't heard anything from them, so I call the pharmacy again, assuming that they probably called it. And still, the prescription had not been called in. And I'm like, okay, this is really messing me up. It was like an antibiotic for something, and I needed to get it in my system. And so I start driving home, and I stopped to get gas. And while I was out of the car, I noticed that the doctor's office had called, and they left a message. So I listened to it, and it was the nurse returning my call. And she's like, hi, I'm returning a missed call from Stacy. I'm just letting you know that I'm leaving for the day, but please feel free to call back tomorrow. I am now livid. I'm like, I don't need to talk to you, lady. I needed you to call in my prescription. So I just needed a minute because now it was going to be at least a whole nother 12 hours before I could get it. And I call my mom to vent to her. And she goes, hey, I have some extra of what you need. Completely random. Apparently her doctor gave her extra in the case that she needed them. I don't know how that works, but I screamed. I'm like, no way. Honestly, forget the prescription. At this point, it's like, what are the odds? I busted out laughing and I told her about my experiment and how I had asked for a miracle and how it had happened right before my 48-hour mark was up. And one of the biggest takeaways I had from this, which I have to mention, is how I was able to receive my miracle. Yes, I had to ask for it. And yes, I had to buy into it and believe it. But how is it that a miracle is received? Well, in order for you to have a miracle, you have to go through a situation that would allow something to be deemed a miracle, such as me not being able to get my prescription. Mind you, this was only a miracle because I had to go through the down and not get what I needed to then in a different way get what I needed. And this is the 101 of life, prayer, and manifestation. It's just like what I talked about earlier on the season when I talked about what a crisis is and how when we pray for things or ask for things, Spirit sometimes has a roundabout way of giving us what we want in disguise. This is it. And shame on me for asking for a miracle and forgetting that in order to have a miracle, there has to be a situation that probably isn't ideal, so that it can later morph into something that is ideal. That is a miracle. And it was absolutely amazing. So, in addition to this experiment, another one that is fun to try will prove to you that what you look for or focus on is what will be manifested. And the idea is to show you the power of your mind and show you that we can create situations or physical items or feelings by solely focusing on what we want. For the next experiment, you also have 48 hours and you want to ask to see something that is not super common, but it doesn't have to be impossible. You're just trying to prove to yourself that what you place your attention on is what you will notice. And when you really think about that, it's a powerful thing. It allows us to create the life we desire through what we choose to focus on. I heard a great explanation recently. I don't know if it was from the book or if I had heard it elsewhere, but whoever was talking described being in a grocery store. So imagine you have a list of things that you need. You go into the store and you're looking for those items, but just because you're only looking for specific items doesn't mean there aren't other different items in the store. If I'm looking for bananas and I don't see the apples over on that table, it doesn't mean there aren't any apples in the store. It just means I'm not looking for apples, so I'm not going to see any. This experiment works the same way. So you're going to ask for something and count how many times you see it in 48 hours. When I did this experiment, the book shared the example of looking for beige cars. Of course, I had to make it more difficult because I'm like, I can for sure find beige cars. Let me choose something harder, which isn't necessarily the point of this experiment. But I decided to see how many purple cars I could find. And I have a 45-minute drive to work every morning and every evening. So I'm like, I'll for sure see purple cars. Now, have I ever seen a purple car? No, or not that I remember. And I quickly realized, shit, I probably should have chosen a different color. I mean, I was like a hawk driving to and from work, looking for purple anywhere I could see it. Didn't see any. And by this point, I pretty much had like no time left. The 48 hours was almost up. Luckily, I had to run a few errands on this evening, so I pulled into this parking lot about to give up on this game. And I swear I am not making this up. I counted at least 10 purple cars in the next 15 minutes. I'm not even lying. One was parked in the lot where I pulled into. A few more drove by. I saw 2 on the way home, and I think some more in a different parking lot. I swear. And of course now, I always see purple cars. So the point of this is, even after all of these experiments are over, you're gonna continue seeing those things because you've been putting so much energy on seeing them. That is the whole point of manifesting and the power of our thoughts and what we put out. We have to learn to focus on what we want to experience and then place our energy on what we want to feel and how we want to live. Then we will more heavily experience those things or feelings. So you're going to look for something and count how many times you can see it in 48 hours. So these experiments really do work, and they really teach you how to trust the process, which is usually the sole thing that we're lacking. So whether purple cars, a new boyfriend, a dream job, anything, whatever you believe and whatever you put your attention on, you will begin calling in. That means, however, the same goes for negative self-talk or doubt. If that's what you're putting your energy on, that's what you're going to experience. So, last but not least, one more experiment or game for you to try will involve a partner. We always talk a lot about synchronicities and how they are not random, but in fact messages and guidance. This next experiment will prove to you that these synchronistic events are not just the result of probability, but instead the product of quantum entanglement, meaning everything is connected to everything. And there's so much study on this in the quantum world that you can look into. And the book E Squared gets into it a little bit, but the reasoning behind why this experiment is important is because we need to understand that our thoughts about everything in this world has an effect on us and the things that we think about or judge or interact with. And we are constantly exchanging energy with everything in our circle of influence. So in this experiment, you're going to try to send someone a message without being in the person's presence. So first, I want you to choose someone who you want to communicate with. Choose someone you know, and then I want you to choose something that you want that person to do, say, or feel. The more specific, the better. Then you're going to practice seeing your target in your mind's eye, or basically visualizing what it is you want them to do, and visualize them receiving the message you want them to have. So for instance, in the book, Grout uses the example of telling her partner Jim to bring home a loaf of bread. So think of something that you want someone in your circle to do, and take your time to visualize your target performing this task. And when you do this, make sure to engage all of your senses. The goal is to really embody and use your senses to connect with this message and truly believe the message is receiving your target. So give yourself 48 hours and keep this message in the forefront of your mind and heart. Also, once it happens, don't forget to document it so you can continue to prove that this stuff is valid. With that is everything that I wanted to share. And I really hope this episode is inspiring for you and fun and interesting, because that's how life should be. We have to realize that our life itself, is pure magic. And it doesn't matter what your background is, what your beliefs are, what your experiences of the past have been, life is magic. It's transmutable. It's created for us, by us. And as we interact with life, we continue to create with every thought, with every feeling, with every movement we create. And when we bring intention and attention to our lives, we begin to shift into an awakened state, a state that allows us to become more aligned with whoever and whatever we desire. We start to realize we are the magicians. We are majestic. We are mystics. There is way more to life than what we can see. And yes, we need to appreciate the physical world and our experience of it. But it would also do us well to plug into the spirit side, the right side of our brain, because we might then discover how much more balanced we become when we can experience both the physical and the spiritual, the mind and the heart. We hold the keys to experiencing anything we can put our minds to. So I will leave you with this. What kind of life are you currently experiencing? What kind of life do you want to experience? Spend time with that and work to build what it is you desire. If you enjoyed this episode, I hope you use it to inspire those around you, and I'll see you next week on In a Spiritual Sense. For those looking to connect further, please feel free to send emails to info@inaspiritualsense.com or hit me up on Instagram, where you can find weekly inspiration and updates. I look forward to connecting with you.